Have you ever wondered why your upstairs rooms stay hot all night? The sun went down hours ago, but the heat just will not quit. That heat is not coming from outside anymore. It is coming from directly above your head. Your attic has been storing it all day like a slow oven. And here is what nobody in the insulation business wants you to know. A single sheet of radiant barrier attic foil costing about $30 can drop that attic by 30 degrees. No machine, no electrician, no permit required. Just one thin reflective sheet and a staple gun. I want to show you exactly why it works. The science is genuinely fascinating, and near the end, I will give you one installation trick from old Pennsylvania barn builders that doubles the effect. It costs nothing extra, and almost nobody outside that tradition ever mentions it. Let me take you back to a dry August afternoon outside Smicksburg. I was 9 years old, sent up into my uncle's hay loft to fetch a coil of rope. Down by the animals, it was sweltering. But up near the roof, there was a band of cool, still air that made no sense. I looked up and saw the whole underside of that tin roof, lined in dull silver sheeting. I asked my uncle what it was. He smiled and said, "That is how we tell the sun no." That one afternoon taught me more about heat than any contractor ever has. So why does a hot roof make your whole house suffer? Here's what is actually happening over your head right now. Summer sun heats your shingles to 160 degrees or higher. That heat moves down through the wood roof deck. Your roof then becomes a giant radiator aimed straight down at your ceiling. The air trapped in a closed attic on a hot day can reach 140 to 150 degrees. That is hot enough to cook food. And that furnace sits directly above the rooms where your family sleeps. Your air conditioner is not fighting the outdoor air anymore. It is fighting that 140-degree ceiling pressing down all night long. The compressor kicks on at 2 in the morning when it has no business running. And somewhere a company you will never meet gets richer. Off heat you never had to let in. Now here is where most people go wrong, and I say this with kindness. They buy more insulation, thick rolls of the pink, fluffy kind, and they still roast. They pile it 3 feet deep and cannot understand why nothing changed. The reason is that fluffy insulation fights only 2 of the 3 ways heat travels. So let me explain all 3. Once you understand them, you cannot be fooled again. The first is conduction, heat moving through a solid by direct contact. Think of a metal spoon heating up in a pot of soup. The second is convection, heat carried by moving air. That is why your upstairs is always warmer than your downstairs. Fluffy insulation handles both of those reasonably well. It traps tiny pockets of still air. That slows the crawl of heat through solid material. But the third way heat travels is the one that ruins your summer. It is called radiant heat, and it moves as invisible rays, exactly like light. It crosses empty space without warming the air at all until it hits a surface. Then it dumps its energy right there. This is how the sun warms your face on a cold winter day, even when the air is freezing. The air did not carry that warmth across 93 million miles of space. It came as radiation and landed directly on your skin. Now here is the critical part about your attic. The heat pouring off a 160-degree roof deck is almost entirely radiant heat. It beams straight down through the attic air and slams into your insulation. The insulation soaks it up like a sponge and slowly releases it into your house all evening. You have been buying a sponge to stop a beam of light. So what actually stops radiant heat? Not thickness, not fluff, not a higher rating number. A shiny, reflective surface. That is the whole secret. A bright aluminum surface bounces those invisible rays right back toward the roof. Scientists describe this property using the word emissivity. A dull, dark surface has high emissivity. That means it loves to absorb and re-radiate heat. A polished aluminum surface has emissivity around 3 or 4%. It refuses to absorb or pass along radiant energy. This is exactly what radiant barrier attic foil does. Good quality reflective foil insulation bounces back 95 to 97% of the radiant heat that strikes it. The heat never enters your attic in the first place. The material has no moving parts, no filter, no compressor. You staple it up once, and it keeps working for the rest of the time you own the house. NASA used this exact same principle to protect spacecraft from raw sunlight. My uncle had it figured out in a Pennsylvania hay barn with a roll of dull silver sheeting and a handful of tacks. Now let me tell you how to do this yourself this weekend. First, make sure you buy actual radiant barrier material. It is sometimes sold as reflective foil insulation. Look for a version with thousands of tiny perforations punched through it. Those pinholes let water vapor pass through while still reflecting heat. Without them, moisture from cooking, showers, and breathing can condense against the foil over time and rot your wood. The vapor goes through, the heat does not. A roll covering a small attic runs about $30. A full average-sized attic costs somewhere between $150 and $300 in material. Compare that to the $4,000 or $5,000 a contractor charges for spray. The single most important rule for installation is this: the shiny side must face an open air gap. If you press the foil flat against a solid surface with no airspace in front of it, heat conducts straight through by touch and the whole effect disappears. The best method is to staple the foil to the underside of your roof rafters. Those are the slanted boards that hold up the roof deck. Drape it across them with the shiny side facing down into the attic. That leaves a natural air gap between the foil and the hot roof deck above it. When the roof glows with radiant heat, the foil bounces it back up before your attic ever gets the message. If crawling along the rafters is not practical for you, there is an easier option. Lay the foil over the top of your existing attic floor insulation. The shiny side faces up into the open attic air. This still gives you the needed gap. It is slightly less effective over time as dust settles on the surface, but it still blocks a large share of the radiant load for years. Go up on a cool morning, bring a good light, wear long sleeves. Bring a box fan to keep air moving. A small attic takes an afternoon. A larger one takes a weekend. Use a hand staple gun. Overlap the seams a few inches. Cut with scissors or a utility knife. That is the entire job. Now here's the barn builder trick I promised you at the start. Even after the foil reflects 95% of that heat, a small amount still builds up in the gap between the foil and the roof deck. If that air just sits, it will eventually find its way down. The old builders solved this at no extra cost by giving the trapped heat a road out. They kept the bottom of that gap open near the eaves so cool air could enter. They kept the top open at the ridge so hot air could escape. Because hot air rises on its own. The moment you open a path at the top, a natural current begins. Cool air pulls in at the bottom, heat climbs out at the peak, all day long with no fan and no electricity. Your foil reflects the radiant heat. And the breathing channel carries off whatever small amount remains. Most attics already have low vents at the eaves and a ridge vent at the top. Your job is simply to make sure your foil does not block those paths. Leave the channel open and let the roof breathe. One final detail from my uncle, the smallest one and maybe my favorite. He never pulled the foil drum tight between the rafters. He let it sag just slightly. I asked if that was sloppy work, and he told me firmly it was not. That gentle sag deepens the air gap and gives heat a little more room to rise and roll out. A loose sheet breathes better than a tight one. You will never read that on the packaging. So picture your attic next July. Same sun, same shingles hitting 160 degrees, same roof you have always had. But just under that deck hangs a quiet sheet of dull silver, shiny face turned down. It sends 95% of that fury straight back up. Above it, a steady, invisible current of air climbing toward the ridge. Below it, an attic running 30 degrees cooler than it ever has. Your bedroom stays comfortable that night. Your air conditioner rests. Your electric meter barely moves. Here is what I want you to do this week. Go up into your attic on a sunny afternoon. Press your hand flat against the underside of the roof deck. Feel how hot that wood actually is. Then come back and tell me in the comments what you felt up there. Tell me whether your attic has vents open at the eaves and at the ridge. I read every one of those comments. I will tell you honestly whether your roof is ready to breathe. If this changed the way you think about heat, subscribe and join us. Next time, I will show you the old Amish masonry wall. That holds heat for 2 full days after the fire goes out. Most people have a cold wall in their house right now that could be doing that job. They have no idea. I will see you there.